policies of DDSN. So, Lori and Sam.
Refresh me, somebody just asked it, but I wasn't tuned in yet. The strikeouts and the highlights are what you already went through?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To get us in line with the policy guideline.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me.
Okay, so going on down, these a lot of these were passed in September 2017, and for whatever reason, this policy never got revised after the commission passed it. So we're going by the 2016 one, but now the 2017 one has been reinstated. So let's just review what was decided in 2017. That the commission will be brought for approval any contractual amount that exceeds $200,000 and excluding any contract adjustments due to filling vacancies based on consumer choice. Contracts with providers to increase capacity that exceed $200,000 will need to be approved by the commission. There was something in there, I thought, in 2017. Well, okay, it's in the next one. Follow through with capital improvement expenditures within the fiscal year as approved by the commission, and capital improvements retaining balances not expended will be closed out within 5 years of the material management time frame. In the capital improvement accounts, you have 5 years to close those out, and we were letting those sit for over a decade in some cases. So that's why we added that one. No more than 10% of the project cost may be transferred from one capital improvement account to the other without commission approval. I don't know if that's been followed or not since the policy wasn't implemented. Present to the commission changes to the organizational chart that result in additional positions exceeding $200,000 prior to implementation. I know that one wasn't followed. But there was something in here about contracts that exceed $200,000 on the life of the contract, and I don't know, I don't see that.
It's under A where it said full contractual.
Do what now?
It's under A where it says full contractual.
Full contractual amount exceeds. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was. Okay. So communicate effectively with the commission. That was in there. 6, present information clearly. 7, inform commission. Okay. So number 8. Well, I think that number 7 we better go back to. Inform the commission if in the director's opinion the commission is not in compliance with its own policies, which we haven't necessarily followed that one either. Number 8, okay, what I did was strike out develop directives because of the policy guidelines and say present draft policies, directives, and standards to the commission for review and approval. Present assessment tools to the commission for review and approval if the assessment tool is to be used for resource allocation. And the reason for that is this latest problem, which has resulted in an assessment tool that apparently was approved by HHS. It was approved by staff of DDSN, was not approved by the commission, but resource allocation was determined from that tool. And so we have had major problems. And now there is a pause on that freeze. Director Maley, Interim Director Maley, has placed a pause on it because the assessment tool itself appears to be very flawed in allocating resources to families for respite services. So there's a pause on it. We recognize there's a problem, but in the future, I'd like for us to get ahead of that. So when you're talking about allocating resources, I think we need to see that tool and approve it. It's not a HHS decision until the commission makes that decision.
Is this tool something that HHS also uses, or only DDSN is using?
Only DDSN, because we are in charge of the waiver. That has been delegated to us. And by law, as the governing body, we can't okay resource allocation without knowing what tools we're using. So I think if we had done that maybe in the beginning, we could have prevented some of the mess we've been in lately. But I really think when it comes to handing out money, we need to know what the rules are.
I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, you said HHS approved it.
Mm-hmm.
The waivers are DHHS's, and they've, under contract, DDSN operates them, so they all have ultimate approval any sort of waiver policies or tools used. And I think what you're communicating is the direction of the modification of those tools you want the commission to approve before they go to DHHS for approval.
I
So that they're
absolutely do.
reflective, is that what you're saying? Does that
They
make
have
sense?
they have like a medical advisory committee instead of a governing board. So that committee also would have to approve it, but we don't need to be circumvented in this process anymore if we're going to be responsible for how
Right,
they.
I agree that we should, something that affects consumers that directly, we should have a look at. I was just trying to understand
How we got.
how to process DHHS if they don't utilize the tool. I do understand that they're the Medicaid agency, so they're the waiver owners, if
They're
you will.
specific to the service. These are the service assessments.
Okay.
Can I just interject and give a little bit of history?
Sure.
And this is really a sore issue with me. When I was appointed on the commission in May 2009, and I came on finding that the waiver document at that time, the IDRD waiver, had already been taken to the Medical Care Advisory Committee, and yet the commission here had never set foot in this office for the commission to approve it. And that was the first meeting I attended, and we were being asked to look at waiver caps. I'll talk about that a little bit more today in the commission meeting. But anyway, my point is, it was such an issue because, one, that was the year that they were going to place caps on services, but yet there has not been a public hearing held either. What had been done was a survey posted on the web and gotten information, and then it was determined from that, oh, we're gonna cap services. But there had not been a public hearing. The commission here had not been formally presented the waiver to vote on. And I remember sitting in the parking lot calling and speaking to George Mackey at DHHS. First asked to speak to Sam Waldrop, and he went there and talked to George Mackey, and we got into a conversation. He said, oh, we don't need DDSN approval. I said, excuse me? I said, you're committing state matching funds of this agency in a waiver document that you're expecting us to operate, and we don't have any say in it, and we haven't even had a public hearing. So we got into a discussion, and so at that commission meeting, I brought all this up. And so what happened was, following that, public hearing was held. It was so well attended that over in 2 Medical Park, they had to open up another conference room. There were so many families there. Sarah, you probably were there. And there were a bunch of advocacy groups that sprung out of that because families were so upset with what was going on. And Andy Laurent issued, and it's in the commission minutes if you want to go find them, but he issued what should be the procedure followed on any waiver, whether it's new, whether it's a renewal, whether it's, an amendment, the procedure where this agency is asked to review the document. There is a public hearing process, and all of that occurs before a decision is made by the Medical Care Advisory Committee.
Can we get a copy of that procedure and look at that in
I'll try to
September?
find.
That might be something we need to go
And-
back to.
That hadn't been happening lately. I mean, Andy Laurent was the interim
No, that's
state
fine.
director
I'll figure out the
before
timeframe.
when
He was here.
Dr. Butkus resigned.
Okay.
Andy Laurent, who had been a former DHHS director, was the interim state director here
Okay.
until Beverly Buscemi was hired.
Okay.
And so when I came on as the commissioner, that was who we were working with initially, just like you're working with Pat Malley. But the point being is that was agreed upon. It's in the minutes of the commission, but that's not something that it appears that we're kind of, every time there's a change in director at DHHS, we get a little bit of difference. And what happens is DHHS seems to be exerting more authority, but my point being is, how can the Medicaid agency be committing you to state matching funds without your having a say in the commitment, at least of those state matching funds?
They're better right now about including us in that determination before they put in a change because they know the state matching funds, but they don't always agree with our recommendations.
It'd be nice if they included us as the governing
Yes.
body, though.
Yes.
The whole thing is awkward where the state Medicaid agency is not the agency administering the waiver.
And all they have to do is change the state law, and we'll. But as long as it is.
No, I know, I'm just thinking about how we got there, and Is it that way in other states where there's a different entity that administers the Medicaid waiver other than the state Medicaid?
Majority of the states, the DD
Most
division or agency is within.
right, they're either cabinet or they're under HHS or they're under DHEC or
Under
something.
social services.
We're under the one, we're like a handful.
Of standalone agencies in the United States.
There are how many, Mary?
6.
Okay.
There's 5 that are, but those 5 of those are appointed, the directors appointed by the governor, and only 1 in South Carolina, where the commission actually appoints.
So, and I had asked,
I mean, there's good and bad to that, but
Yeah.
I think the good part is that our individuals have an identity within the state, a strong identity. So the commission is right to make sure that they are seeing these things before. I'm sorry, I'm speaking as the executive director of York County. Everybody know that? Just as the executive director of York County, I'm not gone there
so
yet.
I asked Mary to be here today and asked Deborah to be here today because she has a wealth of knowledge and, you know, I really think she can help us to rid ourselves of some of the problems that we're facing with as an advocate for families. If we can get in front of some of these things.
Can I, saying that,
Direct-
can I say
Director
one?
of York, you
of-
said-
Executive Director of York County, can we just look at C, on 3C?
We're going next.
I'm sorry, I just think y'all need to consider one thing. You can get around that by hiring one position at a time. And before you know it, you have a whole new section of employees. Somewhere in that statement, I would say, changes to the organizational chart, policies or procedures that may result in. You know what I'm saying? That you would eventually have to tool up to have, because it's a technicality. I can just hire one person at a time and I'm not going to hit that $200,000 mark unless we hire somebody really good. You're never going to get there.
So what should,
Because if you're starting a new procedure, just like the waiver administration, that's a whole new department, really. You should say, we're getting ready, we're tooling up for this. There should be a budget that's presented for that, and the estimated number of employees that are presented to it. That,
the mission,
yeah, it should be. I think, the purpose, I don't know, because I think the mission's the mission of the agency, but the purpose of that new department, and then, because I'm telling you, you can get around this.
all right, so instead of
Hire one
saying
at a time.
changes to the organizational chart, you would say,
Oh, you can say all of those. Changes the organizational chart, new procedures,
common new procedures.
maybe, I don't know if it's, see, I separate policies and procedures to 2 different things in our agency. We don't have them all as one thing. So you have your policy book and you have your procedural book. So policies, procedures, or other requirements, because sometimes the state or federal rules will start giving us more requirements that we have to
That's exactly.
tool up to do that.
Risk management.
Yeah.
requirements with DSIT.
I mean, that's how I would put something like that in there.
Changes to organizational chart or changes or new procedures.
I would say not limited to the organizational chart, and you can put all the other stuff in there. Hannah, help me here.
Present to the commission.
But you see what the point I'm trying to,
Positions, programs, divisions, are you looking for
yeah,
words like that?
yeah. Anything that's going to force us into the
All right.
position of having to maybe put another
Present-
group of folks in.
Present to the commission, what did you say, Sam? Positions,
Programs,
programs,
divisions.
divisions,
Bathrooms, no, I can't.
So what?
Bathrooms.
that result in additional positions exceeding. Okay. That's good. I want a little pathetic pen, I'm out of it. Okay, so. So let's go back to.
Good catch.
I'm pathetic.
Well, I'm from an agency where we have $5,000 in additional cost to the budget. I'm telling my boy. So,
Okay, so, 8 was the assessment tool. So is that good with everybody? Lori?
There we go.
You good with that? Assessment tool?
Mhm.
You're gonna
Shut up about the pen, Vic, you
You're
get
gonna
the
need
whole.
this one, especially if they go to acuity-based
I'm gonna what
funding.
that one?
We're gonna need that one in there, the assessment tool, because if we go to acuity-based funding, which they're looking at, you're gonna have a lot of these things crop up that
We need to look at.
that you're gonna need to, and approve, and the agency will need to have that approval behind them.
Can I know we don't wanna spend too long on any one thing, but following up on what Deborah said, Susan, did you hear when the thing from Andy Lorette
No.
came out? Okay. I was just,
I'm the book of history.
well, I know you are. I was just trying to get from a staff
Here.
perspective, or Tana, maybe you know.
I was, but don't ask me, 'cause
Okay.
I don't remember
No,
long
yeah.
ago, yeah.
CMS dictates
Yeah.
kind of the public hearing requirements, and then that has to be all outlined in a waiver amendment or waiver document. So DHHS typically is the lead on that, and we
Yeah, for
attend
the
those
public
meetings.
hearings, Yeah.
But certainly, if there are issues and recommendations you all want to make to them about following this other policy, we would advocate for that with them.
I think if you look at the June 2009 minutes.
Is that where to look?
That's where you'll find them.
I just wondered, like, what happened if the executive director
What
issued
happened?
that? How do we get to a place where it wasn't really being followed?
Well, because what happens, you have new DDSN directors, new DHHS directors, you have commission members that are rotating off, and staff usually not, just basically ignore this. So, I mean, it happens. I'm just saying that that's the reason why I stick around, because I got a lot of history in my brain. And I remember things, and I distinctly remember the phone call I had with George Mackey. And the one thing I do remember, I got so irritated, I've never hung up on a professional, I got so irritated in the parking lot. Comments that he was making, but I can tell you what, he got changed, because Andy Levine called, and he spoke with Emma Fortner, who was the director at that time, and it got changed, and it was agreed upon. But what is happening now is we keep moving further and further away from it.
I think one of our weaknesses in doing it the way, one of the 6 in the country, is that we rotate on and off, and it's kind of looked at as an advisory thing, except when the poop hits the fan, and then we have to be the governing body, so.
It's not an advisory, it's a governing body.
Yeah,
To be treated as such.
but because
No.
there's such amount of turnover, and with staff also. I mean, the staff were either in different jobs or, and so there's been very little continuity in this whole
Right.
mess.
Right, and I don't think the staff is evil. They're not purposely trying to ignore directives, so I was just wondering what.
Well, no, I think in this situation, with the one that was passed in 2017, it was ignored. There's just no way that you can not put this policy into place after the commission decides. And that was the former state director's decision to do that. So we've got to make sure, that's what I was saying to Susan, we got to otherwise we need to stay at home and not come down here once a month. When we decide something, it's like, whose job is it to go back and see
Is
that?
this happening?
Yeah.
Well, I personally have been surprised that when I've gone on the web and pulled something up, and I'm like, I remember that is not what was decided. And I go back to the minutes of commission meetings, and where I'm finding that the commission did in fact take a position and voted on it, but yet it's not being reflected. So there's some disconnect between what's happening in the commission meetings and what's being reflected on the web. And the web is what people,
See.
anyone that's looking for directive, policy of this commission, that's where they're gonna go.
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect.
Who's a quality person? Do we have a quality person?
Quality regarding
Yeah, what?
what specific?
Well, something like this, just to follow through the chain of what happens, decision to implementation to posting and all that, whose job is
I
that?
think that's executive staff, from the director to the associate state directors.
Maybe we can make that somebody's job.
Oh, certainly. I'd be glad to take that on.
Yeah.
Years ago, there was a staff member who was responsible for ensuring the policies and directives and such. And that they made sure that they were reviewed, that they were sent out for comment. changes were, so I mean, there was one person, that Marilyn Moody that used to work here, she died with cancer, you may have remembered her, she was the one that was responsible.
I wasn't here at that point.
She was
yeah.
the one that was responsible for that.
Okay, so if nobody has a problem with the assessment tool, we'll move on to the rest of these are just, and I don't know why number 12, present to the commission for a vote any administrative directives that cause significant changes to the service delivery system or increased restrictions in reporting abuse, neglect, exploitation, critical incidents, or sexual assault prior to implementation. So the problem with that one became, what is a significant change? Because you could argue you've got room to maneuver there. And I don't know if, because of our policy guidelines and the rest of these, should we leave number 12 in? Because we're voting on all
That's what I'm saying. You doing all of them?
We should, but to go back and do all of them is going to take a while. So I thought, I was torn about that one. Do we leave it in for now and look at it later after we've reviewed them all? But we're going to review any new ones.
Because
Can't-
we're gonna
we can't
review
do it
the
without
policy
you, though.
on that particularly.
I can tell you about number 12.
We're gonna review, we put this in 2017, I think. No,
No, it actually.
It was in there
it was
before.
Actually put in there, and the reason was when I was serving on the commission, a major issue came up when staff changed the standards on adult day health care that were not in agreement with the IDRD waiver that had been approved by the commission. And I remember in a policy meeting bringing up the issue that here you have changes being made to standards and directives that were not even, the commission wasn't even aware of till we started getting phone calls from families. And so what was agreed upon, and it's in the minutes, that any substantive changes would be brought to the commission and would be presented to the commission, I believe, 2 weeks prior to a commission meeting. And Beverly was the director at that time. This happened, I think, in 2013. And so I think that's how that got included.
well, it got included in 2017.
But in 2013 is when the issue first
Yeah, but we
came up.
thought if we put it in the policy, maybe that'll help, but it didn't. So, but anyway, I guess we leave that in there for now because there is a slight difference in approving any new ones. I guess. I mean, we're approving all of them anyway.
That's what I'm saying. Can you not make that a subsection of 8? And then take out that last set, present assessment tools to the commission, and move that, since it's not a policy or procedure, make that its own separate line?
Yeah,
That makes
So.
sense.
put 12 under 8.
Yeah, I mean, that's what that is.
Yeah.
If there's a change to administrative directive, if it's substantial or not, it's going
Yeah.
to come to the policy committee.
Yeah, but in particular, we're spelling out.
Yeah, and you can.
Yeah,
And then take that presenting assessment tools and kind of make that its own, because it's not a policy, it's not a procedure,
a new paragraph on presenting
the
assessment.
assessment tool.
Okay,
But I'm only saying that.
that's good. Right, of York, right? No, I think that's a good idea. Okay, so now number 14 goes back to the policy guidelines that we passed, saying that that the director could make an interim policy when faced with a time-sensitive decision, and that they will try to consult with the executive committee or the commission chairperson whenever possible prior to the implementation of that policy. 15 is the director shall present to the commission for approval all proposed new home and community-based waivers, waiver renewals and/or amendments, as well as waiver manuals and policies recommended to HHS at least 30 days prior to submitting the documents to HHS. The director shall advise the commissioners of any matter involving DDSN prior to the matter being considered by HHS Medical Care Advisory Committee. The director shall keep the commission informed of all matters involving inquiries from CMS regarding DDSN programs and all submissions to CMS involving DDSN programs of which the director is familiar.
Back to 14.
Okay,
I think I sense something, the director will bring, whatever time-sensitive thing you put in there, and you have to implement, I can't even imagine what that might be, that you have to do that quickly. But by the next commission meeting, by the next policy meeting, this will be put to a full vote of the commission. That time-sensitive thing you do?
yeah,
I think I sent you a note on that one. I know I worded it much better.
yeah,
That, in other words, you put something in place because it's an emergency. You come back and you get it ratified with the full group, because we've done that before too.
okay, so director,
But I just can't think of a policy that would have to go in that fast. It takes us longer to write them.
so director will present, let's just say to the full commission, we may not have time to do to the full commission.
The next available date,
At the next commission meeting.
Shoot, I turned my phone off.
We'll present the interim policy to the full commission at the next commission meeting.
Yep.
Good.
Thanks.
And we're,
Heather vote.
in this number 15, basically, it's just kind of trying to close all the loops where I have felt, even in my 3.5 years, that HHS pulls to a certain extent on staff to go in this direction or that direction, and they don't need to be working for HHS, and we need to kind of get ourselves out from this stuff. Okay, and that is the executive limitations policy. So do I hear a motion that, is there any more discussion about any of that?
Question, were you just making all the notes of all the proposed?
Susan and I were, so I imagine we'll
And Sandra,
come up with
if
something. We'll pass the full.
you like, I can kind of make the first edit.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Send it to you.
That'd be helpful.
Sandra and I'll work together on that.
Yeah, I send it to all three of us.
At the same time?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So you want a motion on what?
The changes,
As discussed?
as presented and discussed.
Okay, well, I'm good for adoption.
Second.
Okay. So there's no reason to all say aye, because there's only two of you. Okay, so motion carried. So, let's go to the reason for all this other stuff. So, all these other policies that y'all have to do with, and this is something that Deborah has asked me to do since I became chair of the policy committee, and it is go back and review these directives that have been changed. Some of them have been changed, I guess, and some of them have been put up for change. And it involves removing families, or not removing, changing families to legal guardianship. And I'm assuming these changes were made in regard to pressure from final rule.
I think that, my paraphrase is that, I know there's many ways to say the same thing, but that the adults with disabilities, unless they're determined to be incompetent, they hold those rights to make those decisions first. And so it is in part a review because of the final rule and looking at choice and rights, but kind of the legality and the other chapters that we follow with the code.
So we have, in some cases, eliminated families' right to decide and to know certain. If the client says, I don't want mama to know that I was assaulted, then we're not going to tell mama.
If they're an adult who has not chosen to have a representative contacted, then just like we're adults, they're adults, and that's kind of how the law reads, to be consistent.
Okay, so we're
Yes.
Agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm stating it correctly.
so
The intent is not to exclude families in any way. It was
Right.
just so that individuals have rights, just like we have rights.
Right.
Making sure that it was parallel with that. But at any point, a person could have a personal representative they choose to be contacted about those things. And that certainly, there was no intent to eliminate or reduce the role of families, but just to make sure the individual rights that had never been removed from them were retained.
What's the difference? So I understand that a family can take guardianship at the age of majority. What is the process for obtaining a personal representative? Or
It's not defined as far as I'm aware of when we've read about it. It states, and you add to it please, because I know you've studied it too, but it just talks about the person can have a representative. And so that would be, like somebody I would choose to come and help me make a decision.
Right.
It seems
There's
to be very
there's no
informal.
formal process for how you designate one?
I haven't
I
seen
think,
one.
though, let's get back to what our state law says. And I think you've got 3 acts that I've been counting. The Adult Health Care Consent Act, you've got the Rights of Clients with Intellectual Disabilities, and the Family Support Act. And the Adult Health Care Consent Act applies to anyone. It doesn't matter whether they have a developmental disability, a head injury, spinal cord injury, they're a senior or what. And there is a procedure in that act that specifies how you determine if someone's able to consent or not. And it takes literally 2 physicians that make that determination. This agency has chosen to ignore, even when families have 2 physicians signing off saying they're unable to consent. I had that experience myself when Heather was served through this agency. So don't tell me it's not happening. Then, when you look at the rights of clients with intellectual disabilities, it specifically talks about a client's representative and defines a client's representative. So I don't want
As what? As who?
it can be the family, it can be the parent, it can be someone. I can go back to.
But it's somebody they choose. It's somebody
doesn't
that
say
the
that.
client chooses.
It doesn't
'cause
say
we're
that.
talking about the rights of the client,
doesn't
so it's
say
the
that.
client's choice.
Would y'all like me to read that section?
Yeah.
Okay. It's very small, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
It says,
I
and this
can't
is-
hear, I'm deaf.
This is in Title 44, Chapter 26, Rights of Clients with Intellectual Disability, and it's 3. Client representative means the client's parent, guardian, legal counsel, or other person who acts on behalf of, on behalf or in the best interest of a person with intellectual disability or related disability. So again, the client's parent, guardian, legal counsel, or other person who acts on behalf of or interest of.
Okay.
Right. So that's what our state law says. Then when you go, and this is the issue that I kept trying, I tried for months, since March. Well, actually, this whole issue came up September of last year in a policy meeting, where prior to that, I believe, actually it was a legislative meeting that Vicki had chaired, and the whole issue came up about indicating personal legal guardian. And there were going to be some recommendations that were going to be sent to the House Legislative Oversight Committee. And that meeting was held, and the very next day, Pete Leggett writes off a memo basically chastising the commission, saying that, oh, this was wrong. Well, I called and had been in conversation even before this meeting with Kenny Howard in CMS Regional Office and said, am I misinterpreting this? This is how I've read final rule. This is what I'm finding. She said, no. She called Pete Leggett. In fact, I was sitting here in this room when there was a meeting, walked out, took her phone call, and she said, I've called Pete Leggett. She was on annual leave at the time. She called Pete Leggett and said, you're misinterpreting the CMS final rule. Well then, unfortunately, Kenny Howard retired the end of April. I've been trying for months to get CMS office to put in writing something that we could use to say, is it or is it not? So I finally got so frustrated, I sent 3 emails to Congressman Tim Scott's office. And so yesterday in the mail, I got this from their office. And this is not as strong as I would like, but this is what it says. CMS regulations under 42 CFR 435-923 require state Medicaid agency to permit applicants and beneficiaries to designate an individual or organization to act responsibly on their behalf in assisting with the individual's application and renewal of eligibility and other ongoing communications with the agency. CMS also has guidance for state Medicaid waiver applications, which describes various assurances and other information a state must include in their waiver program applications. Certain assurances reference participants' representatives or the person or individual's legal representative and sometimes family. For example, in prescribing the state of the service plan development process, the guidance states that the planning process also enables and supports each participant and/or family or legal representative as appropriate to fully engage in and direct the planning process to the extent he or she chooses. So that was the response I got from yesterday. But this whole, and I'll make sure you get the one.
Email it to me, or
Yeah.
I can take a picture of it right now.
Sure.
Thank you.
So this whole issue has boiled down to, and I think it's gotten to be ridiculous, personally. I mean, this whole thing about changing a directive, saying if somebody's sexually assaulted, you're not gonna notify, and clearly the person can't consent. You know, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes that they're able to consent, but for those who can't consent, it's totally ridiculous for you to say, well, they've got to be the legal guardian for mom or dad to know. They go to the day program, they're sexually assaulted, and they come home, and you don't know what's going on, and they're not able to get counseling or medical attention, and nobody's telling the family?
And
I mean, that's ridiculous.
what the agency is saying is that it violates the individual's right to privacy, right to privacy or whatever.
Right.
If there's kind of a compulsory contact
Right.
without the person designating someone to contact, it would be.
Well, I want to
It's
ask,
the same thing, like when you go to the doctor's office and they ask you to sign, who you
You
want to
designate.
have, get your medical information or share your medical information with. It's the
But they
same
could
type thing.
designate.
well,
They
it's
can
a
designate,
strange-
yeah, they
it's
can
a
designate,
strange
yeah.
thing
They
that
could
I have
designate.
taken Heather to Richland Memorial, MUSC, Greenwood Genetics. I've taken her out of state to professionals, and I not one time have been asked, are you the legal guardian? I've been asked to sign papers, whatever. Now, maybe they're doing it wrong, I don't know, but I'm just telling you, I've taken her everywhere, and the only place, and as well as DHHS, now, you're talking about the Medicaid agency. Heather's served through CLTC. Not one time have I ever been asked, are you the legal guardian? You're sitting here in the meeting. Now, you can't be here unless she chooses for you to be here. Now, you can't sign this plan because you're not the legal guardian. Now, why is the Medicaid agency using a totally different set of standards for a 1915C waiver? And over here, this agency chooses to use totally different procedures.
The reality of this is, if one of our individuals, say something happens at an SLP or something, it's never somebody residing in our CTHs, or they're not going to say, don't tell my mom. The only people that ever say, I don't want my family here, are people with really strained relationships that are very high functioning and able to tell, they're already living on their own, and that's the issue. I almost feel like we're straining gnats here, because the truth of the matter is, doctors, if they see that ID diagnosis, they want somebody else to consent. I don't care how high functioning that person is. It's a shame, but it is what it is.
So I think
We're left out there hanging.
and right now, we're not going to be able to debate all these, however many policies there are. But now, let's just, on the process part, which ones of them have already been changed to reflect?
Senator Alexander on Tuesday said they were going to do something about this at our meeting on Tuesday. So I spoke to him on Tuesday as
Who's going to do what about what?
the legislator's going to look at making, put it right back to where it used to be. They see it as an omission.
Well,
You're talking about the adult health care.
Y'all look at it, yeah.
okay, so, but right now, we have these directives that are not clear and are creating angst when I don't think they really need to. I think it's a matter
First
of,
four, if I'm not mistaken, Susan, you can correct me, but I believe the first four were the ones that were put out, that we sent, many people sent in letters asking for public hearings.
okay, those were put out, but were they changed?
They have not been finalized.
They have
So
not been
meaning, we follow the policy review directive
Yeah.
that says 3-year cycle, we make recommended changes, we put them out for comment, we receive comment, we incorporate the comments. We have not incorporated the comments because this process was sort of frozen.
Yeah.
So there are comments received that we could then take back and modify and then finalize or follow
Okay.
the process. So no, they are not finalized.
And what about these below?
Well, that's what I was going to try to pull my chart here. We have 4 on your list of 10 that were in the review modification process, and then the others were The others were not due for review, so they've not been taken.
They've not been changed, but you're going to say the right thing.
I will have to review those.
Okay.
I don't
So,
have that information.
so,
The other issue is, there are some directives in this agency
There are others.
that do reflect representative. So there's inconsistency even among your directives. It's not a matter of where DDSN has consistently changed it to person legal guardian. It's the fact that it appears to me, whichever staff member it was under that was doing the revision made it change to person legal guardian, or whether it was left to representative, because the ones that were signed by David Goodell, I was noticing, still said representative. So there seems to be some difference of opinion within the agency.
okay, so what if our process moving forward would be to take those first 4 that have already been reviewed and look at those in September? And I really do believe what Mary said seems reasonable. It's something like, we'll be informed unless the individual specifically requests.
Used
They
to
know.
be in something. That was in a document somewhere that said, unless the person does not want.
Chooses not to, and they would have to be pretty
In like,
high functioning.
and not just that, I mean, it would have to be one of those rare occasions we have all those other factors, because most people want, that's their circle, that's, if we're gonna talk person-centered, they gotta be the center of something other than paid professionals.
But we
So-
got to solve, I think if we can break through solving it in one directive, we can break through solving it in all.
Mhm, I think so.
And it
It's-
has to be documented,
That the person, it has to
well,
be,
that you asked.
Right.
okay, you're going to ask everybody then?
No, I mean, if somebody is raped in a facility and you're meeting with them, the doctor's meeting with them, then they need to ask them what their choice is. And if you're going to have the policy say be informed unless the person chooses not to allow the information, you need to document
That
that
you
that
asked.
question was asked and what the response was.
Well, I'm not sure about that one, because I'm not sure that everybody is at that level where they can say.
Well, then that's documented. You see what
So
I'm saying?
then in that case, you would definitely call the family.
Right.
Okay.
We could not, the person's non-communicative for whatever reason.
But what if someone can't give consent because people around them are saying that this person can't consent? Why isn't not telling my mom or dad part of that can't give consent part?
No, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
all
I'm just
right,
saying
okay.
documented in the record that they can't say yes or no, they want.
And then call the parent.
What's being proposed is just changing the default to where the family is told. What you're suggesting is the default will be
Make
the
an
family
exception
is
if they say
told
no.
unless
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Fit in
The-
with
the
the
procedure
final
is you
rule and all that
contact
kind of
the
stuff?
family unless they say no, you don't.
unless they say no, they don't want to be contacted. And if somebody is unable to
And we document
verbalize,
that.
then the default will be contact the family. So we're just talking about, and as to whether that comports with other state law, I don't know. But I'm just saying that that's what the proposal is.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, do we know what the other states are doing?
Well, I didn't mean that other
Be what their
states are-
state law says.
Our
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
It's basically, it's state law.
Well, the issue is whether what we're talking about is healthcare.
Right.
I mean, there is a law that applies to healthcare.
Mhm.
Is this healthcare or
Yeah.
not?
Can we not word it as close to state law as we can get, or reference the state law in our directive and then do the default thing, just so we'll have some kind of reference? I mean, we're just kind of making
Kind of
up
a
stuff,
procedure.
otherwise, aren't we? So we could do that I think we need to start going back to state law in all these policies and referencing them, because it reminds us that somebody else has set a law that says this is what the commission will do, this is what the state director will do, this is what Adult Health Care Consent Act will do, and that's another mess.
Well, I think it's interesting that when you look at what actions did the legislature take, if the legislature intended for families to always have to seek legal guardianship, then why did they pass the adult health care?
No, and I
consent
think
act?
you're
I
making
mean-
a and you've made the point loud and clear for a while. And it's important because you've got people out there who are going to do exactly what's on that directive. And we can get a mess, because if we just withhold information from people, with people that are not capable of making that choice, so I just don't think it's I think it's we gotta word this, I don't think it's that hard to get there from here.
There's a statute that we kind of based it upon the Adult Healthcare Consent Act, but it's the Educational Rights Consent Act. But there's some language in there that you could pull and might be beneficial that talks about an ability to communicate with or without assistive technology. You know, I mean, if somebody can only communicate through eye gaze, you take it away, they can't communicate. So it's got that qualification.
Is that for children though? We're talking about.
That's that law is for those between age 18 and 21. Is there a default education decision maker? So we created in law a default education to consider decision maker, but only in the event somebody cannot communicate. So if they can communicate what they want, then, you know,
Parallel.
So
they can do a power of attorney.
What
and some
statute is
other
that, do you
things.
know, where?
Since 2016.
It's the
wasn't
Adult
it?
Students with Disabilities Educational Rights Consent Act, and I can't remember where it
I
is.
can't
Find
remember,
it.
but I think it was passed in 2016. didn't it?
So we're gonna take, just so I know, we're gonna take these top 4 that have already been commented on, and we're gonna send them out again. And we're gonna take in what everybody here said, and then we're gonna come back with all those comments and make decisions about these 4 in September. And I think if we can get past 1, we can get past 4, if we figure it out.
And just to be clear, the language about the default and contacting family should be inserted before they're sent out for comment again. Because otherwise they're just commenting on the same version again.
You want to force people.
Is that
What do y'all want to do? Because these are directives that have been sent out with comments. And what Susan's saying is, do we go ahead and change it to the default version and get comments on that, or do we send it out like the original one was?
Because otherwise you're kind of just repeating this
I would,
comment period again if you don't change it.
No, you mean like a draft?
Yes.
Send it out in draft with the.
Revise it again.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say do that.
Because that will give
Then you
us
get feedback on the revision instead of the feedback on the
language to put in
that
there.
you don't want.
Well, it makes sense if they've commented on it, that we would revise it according to the comments received,
Yeah.
and then
Now, let me ask you, can you go online and comment?
Yes.
Okay, so
24 hours a day.
can you go online and sign up as an advocate to be alerted when we change something?
I saw that you had
Asked
asked
for
about
that.
that. There's a way we can do that, but currently,
It's not there.
well, a person would have to want to do that to know to request it, I guess. I don't think it's advertising saying if you want us to notify you anytime there are changes, insert
think
your
there-
email here, but we could create a mechanism to do
There
it.
needs to be a way for them to go on the web and sign up to be notified when we make changes to policy at DDSN. Families, anybody who's.
Medicaid will use sign up for
Stay
bulletins. I
Yes.
guess it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
Figure out a way to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
We'll
Maybe
figure out a way to do it.
that would be helpful, because otherwise you've got to really watch that website for a change in directives. Ray, did you have anything from the DD Council any opinion on this, or?
No, the DD Council, we like to maintain a neutral stance. The way that this policy committee is developing with public input in the future, that's something we'll take a look at and take back to our council and our board and see if in the future we would want to make a public comment. But usually, this is part of our DD network observing, and
Okay.
so at this moment, the DD Council doesn't have a comment.
So do y'all receive notification when we're getting ready to change something?
We receive notifications for commission meetings and policy meetings. Some of the work that y'all do in coordination with DHHS, such as the rate study, we get notifications on that. But for individual policies, we haven't received notification.
Okay, thank you. I'm just learning about what you do.
I didn't see it included in this packet, but those.
Okay, so we got 3 minutes. Do we have anything else?
Are you presenting any of this to the commission?
I don't think I'm on the agenda. Am I on the agenda?
I think
I thought you were, I can go pull it real quick, I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right. If I am, I am. Wing
Yeah,
it.
she is.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, good, lovely.
Usually after a meeting there is something.
So, do all the commission members have, they won't have this, will they?
Make sure they have it, except I don't know if I can get the edits that fast and get them accurate.
I can read it here.
You want me to have them run copies?
Well,
It's just 3 or 4.
are we gonna be able to follow the era from 12 to 8?
Explain
I
it.
mean, we don't have it, we have a short period of time here to do that. I can just say we're moving 12 to under number 8, they can follow.
But they need a copy policy to look at.
Yeah,
I'll get the copies.
unless you want that? No,
I'm gonna make them. I'll make them.
okay,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you, Susan.
I'll start without me if I'm late. Don't wait for me.
I think you will be.
Blink inside. I don't like to be seen.
Just want you to know that the comments that I had submitted, I gave to Susan, because I didn't see them included in the packet, but those are the ones I
I'll make sure, yeah.
So-
We included one of your
You
emails.
included an email, but the
Yeah.
one that was sent, formal one, was not included in there.
And just as a,
The comments on what?
On the board directors.
Oh, okay.
So I just want
and
you
just
to
as
know.
an aside, the vehicle to do that is through the website, so that's exactly what happens is sometimes they get put to a person and then they don't go through the vehicle, and so that, I believe that's the only reason that would have been missed.
Well-
But we did try to include your May 21st version in there.
And that's the.
So I apologize for that, there's no harm intended, but
We can fix
that's
these
what
4
happened.
next time.
I got
I
it.
believe the 10 would be,
We would just mimic it.
Oh, the 10 will be easier. The key issue is just.
Okay, I'm gonna run and make copies.
thank you,
Adjourn us.
thank you. We're adjourned.
Okay.
Sam says so. Oh.